Hello, my friends, and I hope everyone had a sexy Halloween and a beautiful Samhain. I'm still exhausted, but that's just how it goes. It's hard to sustain the old energy levels at this time of year, at least for me. Um, God, I was talking to my friend, and we were sort of remarking about, how somehow the energy is really high right now, like this time of year, but we're just also constantly on the verge of being like wiped out. It's a lot. It's overwhelming. The dreams are vivid as hell and weird as shit. There's just a lot of things going bump in the night, so to speak. The spirits have a lot to say, and at this time of year, they do not allow themselves to be ignored. So it's just a lot happening. I actually got an email from a witch a couple weeks ago that sort of addressed this phenomenon a little bit. She writes, ever since I did my first spell, I've really dug in and moved forward, figuring out what I believe and what resonates with me in this work, figuring out what calls to me and what doesn't. I'm just so de-energized. I've been meditating and getting enough sleep. My eating habits have been more stress-driven, so I've been keeping an eye on that. But I feel like my energy has been sapped. I am doing what I can physically to make sure there isn't another cause, but is there any work you can recommend for energy levels and overall health for this kind of a situation? I have the ability to make soaps and things like that too, so there really aren't many limitations. Do you think there's a correlation in energy drain when someone is first starting out versus when someone is more well established in their practice? Yeah. And I also have a couple suggestions. But honestly, the energy drain is a factor that never seems to stop. There will be periods when energy is high, no matter how much spiritual work you do. And at other times, your energy will be drained no matter how well rested you are. There are a lot of factors at work. The spell work that we do is only part of the equation. The moon phases, planetary alignments, the time of day, the time of year, our hormonal cycles, all of this seems to team up to make sure that we never get too comfortable. So it is what it is. But we can certainly do our best to sort of set ourselves up for success. One thing that's not sexy or exciting is simply grounding regularly. And I know it gets trickier as the weather gets colder, but any time that we can spend with our feet or our hands in the grass, in the soil, or at least just standing outside in the sun, this is going to make a huge difference. Again, not cool and fun and exciting, but very effective. Another thing that I find helpful is to sleep with selenite or quartz under the four corners of my bed. It creates a large crystal grid that, kind of cleanses the energy while we're sleeping, and it basically helps to act as like a reset button. And then lastly, Hex-Breaking Soap. Now, the witch who wrote in is a soap maker, so I did give her the recipe that I use to make Hex-Breaking Soap, and this stuff is legit. Now, I use a goat's milk soap base, although you can use whatever base you like. If you're a vegan, you can use glycerin, whatever your personal preference is. And to that, I do add shea butter just for moisturization because I'm a little bit vain. And if I'm going to be washing myself anyway, I might as well feel nice. And then to that, for the purposes of the work itself, I add lavender oil and thyme oil and olive oil. And then I drop a few tumbled obsidians right into the soap mixture as well before it cures, for protection. And this is a multi-purpose soap. It's not just for when we feel like we're under deliberate psychic attack, but anytime we need to clear our energy or refresh ourselves, clear any obstacles that are against us, or just to make room for abundance, this is the stuff for that. And I always recommend washing yourself, starting at the crown of your head, moving all the way down throughout the body, right to the soles of the feet. And then Allow the element of water to wash all of that funk, all of the ickiness, the heaviness, the negativity down the drain and away from us. But again, it's also just the time of year. It can feel like a lot. So we got to give ourselves some grace and accept the cycles. And, our highs are just as valid as our lows. So we have to honor that. Now, on to the topic of the day. We're going to talk about a new form of divination. It's not a new form, it's a very old form of divination. But this subject was suggested by Hedge Witch. I'm pretty excited to talk about it. It's one of those forms of divination that aren't unheard of, but it's not super common. But the cool thing is that most of us probably already have what we need around the house to start trying it. Like if you've got an old Yahtzee game in the closet, you're set. If you've got Monopoly, you're good. Today, we are going to talk about Astragalomancy. Astragalomancy. Astragalomancy, which is sometimes called cubomancy, is a form of divination that uses dice or historically small, like roughly cube-shaped bones, usually the knuckle bones, the ankle bones, from goats, sheep, or deer. And mine that I use are from deer, so they're a little bigger than what you would consider like the typical knuckle bones. But these bones may be marked with the traditional pips or dots, 1 through 6 on each of the 6 sides, or they might be marked with letters or symbols or runes or what have you. And then, they're dice. You throw them and then you read the message according to the numbers or the symbols that are face up, or even according to the formation of the dice themselves as they land on the ground. And this form of divination has been used all over the place, really. The Greeks and the Romans were super into it. It was popular in Tibet, still is, parts of South America, all along the Silk Road, Mesopotamia. It's got a lot of historical traction. And so it's also not like there's only one way to correctly interpret those messages. And, okay, so I have a book on Astragalomancy that I really like. It's called A Loaded Guide, Intriguing Readings of 21 Discrete Dice Throws. It's by Craig Conley. And it's a whole lot of history and some filler, to be honest, but it's well written. It's easy to follow, and it's like a straightforward guide to dice reading or bone reading. But there's a bit in there that gives a really good overview that I wanted to read before we get into the meat here. There is perhaps no better way to conjure up the spirit of great antiquity than to roll dice. The very ancient game of throwing knuckle bones dates back to the Trojan War, if we are to take Sophocles' word. The original knuckle bone was technically a bone in a sheep's ankle, the astragalus, hence divination by astragalomancy. The great philosopher Plato traced dice even farther back, to the ibis-headed Egyptian god Thoth, inventor of magic and writing and science, divine arbitrator, judge of the dead, and maintainer of the universe. Plato himself played dice not only with cubes, but also tetrahedrons, octahedrons, dodecahedrons, and icosahedrons, the famous Platonic solids of geometry. Plato said, God geometrizes, and that's a key to why dice have always been associated with divination, the geometric solids as building blocks of the universe, embody truths on higher planes. Over the centuries, several rules have been associated with throwing dice for divination. However, it is entirely a matter of personal choice whether these are followed or ignored. Many of these rules are arbitrary and were probably developed to add mystery and significance to divination by dice. Do not be afraid to develop your own guidelines, nor to be completely spontaneous, using the dice in different ways according to your instincts at the time. Trusting your instincts is the best way to get a good reading. And I love that. Because in other words, while we can go through some common interpretations for certain dice throws and formations, and we will, but the more we do it, the more we can and should begin to interpret things using our own intuition and experiences. And that's the truth for absolutely every kind of divination that we will ever do. The guidelines are just that. They're guides. They are not the law. Our own sixth sense is always the authority. So we should always trust our instincts when it conflicts with the so-called rules. At least for divination. Now, for the purposes of this episode, we are going to assume that the dice or bones that we use have traditional dot or pip markings on them. And like I said, a lot of dice have symbols or letters or runes and so on, but we're going to stick to the basics today. Now, the first thing that you need after your dice is a circle to cast the dice in. And you can draw it on the ground with chalk, or, if you want to use a cloth that's got a circle printed or stitched onto it, but whatever you choose to use, you're going to want that circle to be about 9 inches in diameter. And this is how the reading begins. The question is posed, and the dice are cast. Now, to determine the meaning of the reading, you will first examine if any of the dice have fallen outside of that circle. Regardless of the question asked, when one dice is outside of the circle, we know difficulties lie ahead. When there are 2 dice outside of the circle, then we know arguments and quarrels are likely. When all 3 dice are outside of that circle, you've got your sign of good luck and success, and basically no reading is needed. You can go confidently forward, assuming that everything is going to be just fine. However, the dice that land within the circle will be totaled up, and their sum indicates the message. And the answer is as follows. Now, for a 0, a 1, and a 2, is no answer available regarding that particular question. Basically, the magic 8 ball says ask another day. If it's 3, which would be, 3 ones if you're using 3 dice, then you know that a change in your circumstances is happening soon. If you total up to 4, we can look forward to unpleasantness or arguments or misunderstandings. For 5, an unexpected surprise or new information. And we can also interpret that to mean that our plans and wishes will be fulfilled. If we've got a 6, then we can expect a loss of some kind, most likely financial, possibly material, or even a relationship, though. For 7s, expect potential hardships, to be the victim of gossip, to have just some bad luck financially. Now, this will eventually be resolved. 7 does not mean certain death. For 8s, we just know to be cautious. We should not act hastily because a lack of discretion will lead to misfortune. For 9s, we can expect a possible union in love or in business, and success in romance or potentially gambling as well. For 10s, we can look forward to new beginnings, possibly a birth or a new job or promotion. For 11s, we can expect the loss of a person, and this can be up to and including death or illness, even a short-term illness. This can also, though, herald the return of a person who has been estranged for some time. For 12s, we know that important communication is on its way. And if this is a legal matter, then we need to get wise counsel. There's also the potential for coming into a large sum of money. If we roll a 13, then we just know that we need to maintain the continuation of our current path. For 14s, a friend or relative is going to offer their assistance to us for whatever the circumstance may be, but also possibly we can look forward to a new romantic arrival. For 15s, we need to proceed with caution. We need to avoid starting new projects for the next week or so, and also watching ourselves around gossip. We don't need to be drawn into it. We don't need to participate in it. Bad news. For 16s, We need to go anytime we have the opportunity for a short trip, any kind of travel, any sort of quick, weekend trip or whatever. This is going to provide entertainment, potentially profit, but certainly some kind of relief, like emotional or just recreational relief. For 17s, we can expect a change of perspective. We might need to plan for some adjustments. We need to be receptive to the counsel of others, really need to sort of crowdsource opinions. Even for people that we maybe don't necessarily know, we can't just be blazing our own path and to hell with what everybody else thinks. And then finally, 18s, very, very good luck. Very good luck. Success, blessings, attainment, fulfillment, abundance, all the good shit. But again, that's just one interpretation. We can use numerology too. So, if we rolled 3 6s, which would add up to 18, in numerology, we would then take the 1 and the 8, add those together, and get 9. And as you may recall from the numerology episode, in numerology, 9s represent resolution or something coming to fruition. And you know what? I'm going to link that episode, the numerology episode too, because it could be very helpful if the numerology method is the answer for you. And I do like using numerology for this too, to be honest. Just kind of go with how I feel at a given time. But just to quickly recap that numerology info, 1s represent potential and opportunity. 2s represent duality or balance. 3s represent communication and cooperation. Also, sometimes they will represent groups. 4s represent stability and structure. 5s, conversely, represent instability and often conflicts, interpersonal conflicts. 6s represent growth. 7s represent knowledge and also faith. Just, taking a little bit of faith and having just confidence that things are going to be okay. 8s represent change and also mastery or accomplishment. And then 9s, as we said, means something is coming to fruition or is resolving. So all that is to say, give Astragalomancy a go. I love to recommend trying lots of different divination methods because you just never know when something is going to resonate with you. And dice are inexpensive. They're easy to carry around. And this is an ancient form of divination. This is not some brand new fly-by-night kind of fortune telling. So just think about it, Think about it, try it. It's fun, it's easy, and it's easy to get the hang of it too. That's one thing about throwing dice. It's very, very easy to catch on. So think about it, try it, and come back next week. My name is Eli Rowe, and this has been the Middle-Aged Witch Podcast.